The evening air inside the Golden Key Cafe was filled with soft music and the smell of coffee. People were laughing gently, glasses clinking, and waiters moving from one table to another. It was a normal Friday night where local musicians came to play, and everyone felt relaxed, but tonight something different was about to happen, something no one could ever forget. At the corner of the cafe, near the shiny black piano, sat a man named Leon. His clothes were neat, his posture straight, and his eyes sharp like someone who knew exactly how talented he was. Leon was not just any pianist. He was well known in town, proud, confident, and never missed a chance to show off his skill. His fingers had danced across pianos in big hotels and fancy parties, and he enjoyed the attention that always followed him. Across the room, a young man named Eddie was tuning his small keyboard. He was not as famous as Leon, but people liked him for his kind smile and simple songs that touched the heart. He often played at the cafe to earn some money for his studies, and he always brought gentle peace to the room whenever he played. Tonight he was supposed to perform first, but fate had other plans. Leon sipped his drink slowly, watching Eddie set up, and with a half smile he said loudly enough for others to hear, "That small keyboard cannot even handle real music." The people nearby chuckled, but Eddie only smiled politely and said, "Music is not about the size of the piano. It's about the feeling." That answer made Leon raise an eyebrow. His pride did not like that calm confidence. The cafe went quiet as Leon stood up and walked toward the stage, his shoes clicking against the floor. He looked around and said in a challenging tone, "Why don't we make this night interesting? Let's have a piano duel, you and me, right here, right now." The crowd gasped and whispered. Some clapped with excitement. Others looked unsure. Nobody had seen something like this before. The cafe owner, an older man named Mr. Harris, looked surprised but also curious. He nodded and said, "If both of you agree, the piano is yours." Eddie hesitated for a moment, then smiled and said, "All right, let's do it." His hands were trembling a little, but his eyes were full of quiet courage. He had never turned down a challenge before. Mia, the waitress, was standing behind the counter polishing glasses. She watched everything silently, her heart beating faster with each word. She had seen Leon perform before, and she knew how powerful his playing could be. She also knew how kind Eddie was, always leaving her a small tip and thanking her after every song. She whispered to herself, "Oh no, this could get ugly." Leon sat down at the grand piano. His hands stretched wide, and without waiting for a signal, he began to play. His fingers moved like lightning, fast and loud, filling the cafe with a storm of notes. People clapped, some cheered. His music was strong and proud, each sound bursting like fire. It was clear he wanted to prove something. Eddie waited patiently, watching, listening, feeling the rhythm. When Leon finished his first piece, he stood up with a smirk and said, "Your turn, boy." Eddie took a deep breath and sat at his keyboard. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. Then he started playing a soft melody, slow and warm, the kind that made people close their eyes. His tune told a story of love and hope, simple but full of heart, and for a moment, the cafe became still as if time stopped to listen. When Eddie finished, the people clapped again, even louder than before. Leon's smile faded just a little. He laughed and said, "Not bad, but you can't win a duel with lullabies." Eddie only nodded, saying gently, "Music is not a fight." His calm voice made Leon frown. The air grew thick with tension. Everyone could feel the silent battle between pride and passion. Mia kept glancing at the stage, her hands shaking as she held a tray. She loved music but hated arguments, and she could sense something strange about that night. Something that was not just about who played better, but about something deeper. Leon sat again, determined to crush his opponent with speed and skill. His fingers attacked the keys like thunder. The piano roared with power. Some people clapped, others looked nervous. Eddie stood still beside him, his heart pounding. But he did not interrupt when Leon finished. Sweat glistened on his forehead. He looked at the crowd and declared, "This is how a real pianist plays." The crowd waited for Eddie to respond. But before he could, someone at the counter whispered softly, "Maybe there is more to music than showing off." A few people turned around. It was Mia, speaking without realizing others heard her. Her eyes widened in surprise when Leon looked her way. His sharp voice asked, "Oh, and what would a waitress know about music?" Mia lowered her eyes, her cheeks warm with embarrassment, but there was something different in her gaze, a tiny spark that no one noticed yet, the kind of spark that hides behind quiet souls who carry big secrets. She whispered under her breath, Maybe one day you'll find out. The tension in the cafe did not fade. Everyone was watching, waiting, wondering what would happen next. Leon seemed ready to play again. Eddie looked thoughtful and Mia turned away. Hiding a small tear in her eye, the piano duel had just begun, but destiny was already changing its tune, setting the stage for something no one in that cafe could ever imagine. The cafe was still buzzing with whispers and excitement. The crowd could not sit still. They were waiting for what would happen next. Some believed Leon had already won, while others hoped Eddie would surprise him. Even the lights seemed dimmer now, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for the music to begin again. Leon smiled proudly and wiped his hands on his jacket. His eyes shining with pride, he leaned toward Eddie and said, "You can go first this time. Show us what you've got." His voice carried both challenge and mockery. Eddie nodded silently, his fingers brushing the keys of his small keyboard. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment. The whole cafe went quiet. Even the sound of cups and spoons stopped. Then the first note came, soft and gentle like the beginning of a dream. Eddie played with emotion, each chord rising like a wave of hope. He did not play fast, but his heart spoke through every sound. His melody told of someone who had lost something and was trying to find it again. People felt that story without words. Some smiled, some blinked away tears. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Leon stood near the piano with his arms crossed, his face calm but his eyes watching closely. He could feel the crowd moving with Eddie's music, and a small flame of jealousy burned in his chest. When the song ended, the cafe filled with clapping and cheers. Eddie smiled shyly and said thank you, but Leon only said, "Not bad. But now let me remind everyone what real talent sounds like." He sat down at the grand piano, stretching his fingers like a warrior preparing for battle. His notes exploded through the air like lightning, fast, sharp, and full of pride. His hands moved so quickly they almost disappeared. People gasped and clapped as he went faster and faster. The floor seemed to shake under the rhythm. Leon looked up with a smirk, enjoying the attention. It was power, pure and loud. When he finished, half the crowd cheered loudly, but some stayed quiet, unsure which performance had truly touched them. Eddie smiled and nodded with respect, saying kindly, "That was amazing." Leon chuckled and said, "Of course it was. That's what skill looks like." His words sliced the silence, leaving a bitter taste in the air behind the counter. Mia was cleaning glasses again, but her hands had stopped moving. Her eyes were fixed on the piano. She could feel the storm of sound, the energy of two hearts fighting through music, and she whispered to herself, "They're both missing something, something that music is really about." She didn't know she had spoken aloud until an old lady nearby asked, "And what would that be, dear?" Mia smiled softly and said, "Feeling, not fighting," then quickly turned away before anyone else noticed her. Leon stood again, proud and glowing with sweat. "Let's see if you can follow that," he said. And Eddie nodded. He placed his hands back on his keyboard, but this time he tried something new. He closed his eyes and remembered his childhood, the day his mother gave him his first piano lesson, her voice saying, "Play with your heart, not your hands," and slowly he began to play again. This time his notes were deeper, carrying pain and love at the same time. The room went still once more. Even Leon stopped smirking. His head tilted slightly as if the music touched something hidden inside him. Eddie's song built like a story of rain and light, sadness and joy dancing together. When the final note faded away, there was no sound, just quiet awe, and then gentle clapping that grew louder until the entire cafe was cheering. Leon forced a smile, but deep down he knew the crowd had felt something from Eddie that he could not create with speed or technique then. As Leon prepared to sit again, someone from the corner spoke in a calm and clear voice. "Music is not a fight, it is a gift." Everyone turned to see who had spoken, and there she was, Mia, standing beside the counter with a tray still in her hands. Her face calm but her eyes glowing with something new. Leon laughed and said, "Oh, the waitress speaks again. Do you play too?" The crowd chuckled softly, but Mia did not look embarrassed. She set the tray down and said quietly, "Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But if I did, I would not play to win. I would play to speak." Her words hung in the air like soft rain. The audience went silent again. Leon raised an eyebrow and said, "Then prove it." His tone was teasing. But deep down a strange curiosity flickered. Eddie looked at Mia and said kindly, "You don't have to." But Mia only smiled and replied, "Maybe it's time." The owner, Mr. Harris, stepped forward with a half smile. "Why not?" he said. This is an open night after all. Let the lady play if she wants. The crowd murmured with excitement, whispering things like, "Does she really play?" And, "This is going to be interesting." Mia walked slowly toward the grand piano, her steps soft, her breath steady, her hands trembling slightly as she reached the bench. Leon moved aside with a confident grin. Whispering, "Good luck," she nodded and said, "Thank you." Her fingers hovered over the keys, and for a few seconds no one moved. No one spoke. Not even the lights flickered. It was as if the whole cafe was frozen in time. Eddie watched her closely, feeling something he couldn't explain. Leon crossed his arms, ready to laugh, and the audience leaned forward, waiting for the first note. Mia closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and pressed a single key. The sound that came out was soft, fragile, and full of something no one had ever heard before. It was the sound of truth beginning to rise. The cafe was so quiet that everyone could hear the soft hum of the lights above. Every eye was on Mia, the waitress who had suddenly become the center of the room. Her fingers rested lightly on the piano keys, and her breath came slow and steady as if she was listening to something deep inside herself. Leon stood a few steps away, his arms crossed and his expression half amused, while Eddie watched her with wide eyes full of curiosity and respect. The first note drifted through the air like a whisper, gentle and slow, yet it carried something powerful, something real. The crowd leaned forward as if afraid to miss even a single sound. Mia's hands moved again, and this time the notes began to flow like water over smooth stones. Soft, pure, and full of emotion. Her music painted pictures in everyone's minds. A quiet morning, a mother's voice, a small child laughing near a window, and a heart that had once been broken but was learning to heal. Leon's grin faded. His eyes narrowed as he listened. There was something strange about her playing. It was not fancy, not loud, not fast, but every note touched something in the room that his own music never could. Eddie felt tears sting his eyes. He did not even know why. He just felt like he was hearing a story that belonged to all of them. A story about loss and love and something greater than words. Mia's fingers moved faster now. Her hair fell over her face, but she didn't care. She played like she had forgotten the world. The melody changed into a storm of emotion, rising and falling, strong yet tender. Her hands were trembling but steady at the same time. People in the audience began to breathe in rhythm with her. Some held their chests, others closed their eyes. Even the old man near the counter whispered, "She's playing from her soul." Eddie turned to Leon and whispered softly, "She's amazing." But Leon didn't answer. His face was pale, his pride struggling against the truth that was blooming right before him. He had spent years chasing perfection. But this woman, this quiet waitress, was creating something beyond perfection, something alive. The song slowed again, each note falling like raindrops, calm and gentle. The cafe seemed to melt into the music. The lights shimmered softly across the piano's surface, and Mia's expression softened, her eyes closed. Her lips curved into a tiny smile. It was as if she was no longer in the cafe at all, but somewhere far away. Somewhere safe. Somewhere full of memories that both hurt and healed her at the same time. When the final note came, it hung in the air for a long moment, trembling, glowing, refusing to disappear, and then silence followed. Deep, heavy silence that wrapped around everyone like a warm blanket. No one moved. No one even breathed for a second, and then suddenly the whole room erupted into applause. People stood up, clapping, cheering, shouting her name. Mia opened her eyes, shocked and almost scared. She had not played for an audience in years. Leon took a small step forward, his voice low but honest. "Who are you?" he asked. Not out of pride anymore, but out of wonder. Mia looked down at her trembling hands, her voice soft and shaky. "I'm just a waitress," she said quietly. "But once I was a pianist. I stopped playing after my mother passed away. She taught me everything. She believed music could heal. But after she was gone, I couldn't touch the piano again." The crowd went quiet again, listening closely to her every word. Mia smiled sadly and continued. "Tonight, when I saw you both play, I remembered what she used to say, that music isn't a fight. It's a bridge between hearts, so I played for her. And for all of you." Her eyes sparkled under the cafe lights, and the audience could feel that her words were just as powerful as her song. Eddie stepped closer and said gently, "Your mother would be proud, Mia," his voice warm and sincere. Leon looked at her with new respect. The arrogance that had filled his heart was gone. He sighed and said quietly, "You reminded me what music really means." His voice almost broke. And for the first time that night he smiled, not with pride but with gratitude. "Mr. Harris, The cafe owner wiped his eyes with a napkin and said cheerfully, "That was the best performance this cafe has ever seen. And the best surprise, too." Everyone laughed softly, and the heavy tension that once filled the room turned into light and warmth. People began to talk again, ordering coffee and cake, still glancing at Mia as if afraid she might disappear if they looked away. Mia stepped away from the piano slowly, her heart racing, her hands still shaking. She couldn't believe what had just happened. The crowd kept clapping and someone shouted, "Play another one." She laughed quietly and shook her head, saying, "Maybe later." Eddie walked up to her and whispered, "You know, that was more than music, that was a miracle." Mia smiled and said softly, "Maybe miracles happen when we stop hiding." She looked around the cafe, seeing the happy faces, the shining eyes, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace Leon stood beside her, nodding respectfully. "Next time," he said. "We play together, no battles, just music." She nodded with a gentle smile, and Eddie added, "Yes, 3 hearts, 1 piano." Mia laughed, her laughter soft and bright like the final chord of a perfect song. The night at the Golden Key Cafe would be remembered forever, not as a duel, but as the night a quiet waitress reminded everyone that music was not about winning or losing, but about feeling, and for the first time in a long while, everyone left with their hearts lighter than when they came in. The applause finally faded, but the feeling it left behind still floated in the air like soft music. Mia stood near the piano with her hands pressed to her chest, her heart beating faster than ever before. She could hardly believe what she had just done. The sound of her own playing still echoed in her ears, reminding her of memories she had buried deep inside her soul. Leon was still standing a few feet away, his proud face calm now, no trace of arrogance, only quiet respect. Eddie smiled gently, walking closer, his voice soft as he said, "That was beautiful, Mia. It felt like your heart was speaking to us." Mia lowered her head slightly and said, "Thank you. I didn't plan to play tonight. I just couldn't stay silent anymore." Her voice trembled, and the crowd leaned closer to listen, curious to know more about the woman who had just changed the whole night, Mr. Harris. The cafe owner placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and said kindly, "You have a gift, my dear. Don't hide it ever again." Mia smiled. Her eyes glistening with emotion, she whispered, "I didn't mean to hide it forever, but after what happened, I was afraid." Her words made people look at each other with quiet wonder. What could have happened to make someone like her stop playing such beautiful music? Eddie asked gently, "What do you mean, Mia?" And she looked at the piano again, her reflection shimmering in the black surface of the instrument. "My mother taught me how to play when I was a little girl," she began, her voice soft but strong. "She was a music teacher. She believed that music could heal any broken heart. She always said that every note was a prayer. But one day everything changed. She got sick, and suddenly the piano felt heavy to me. I couldn't touch it without feeling pain." The room went silent again. Even the kitchen staff stopped moving. Everyone listened as if her story itself was another song. Mia continued, "After she passed away, I promised myself I would never play again. I thought if I stopped, the memories would hurt less. So I started working here, serving coffee and listening to others play. I was happy to just watch." Her eyes filled with tears that she quickly wiped away. "But tonight, when you both played, something inside me woke up again. I felt her near me, like she wanted me to try again." Leon's expression softened. He had always believed talent was about practice and power, but now he saw something different. He said quietly, "Your music came from love. That's why it touched everyone. I was too focused on showing off. I forgot that music is meant to connect, not compete." His words were humble, honest and full of regret. Eddie nodded in agreement, saying, "She reminded us all of that." Mia smiled through her tears and said, "Maybe that's why we were all here tonight. Maybe it was meant to happen." Her voice carried warmth and peace, the kind that made people's hearts feel lighter. Mr. Harris nodded with a proud grin and said, "This cafe has seen many performances, but none like this. Tonight will be remembered for a long time." The audience clapped softly again, their faces glowing with admiration. An old woman sitting by the window spoke up, her voice trembling but cheerful. "Child, your mother must be smiling from heaven right now. You brought life into this place." We all felt it. Mia smiled at her and whispered, "Thank you." I hope she heard it too. Her voice cracked gently with emotion. Leon stepped closer, his tone softer than ever before. "Would you let me play with you sometime?" he asked. "No battles, no duels, just harmony." Mia looked surprised, then nodded slowly. "I'd like that," she said. And Eddie added, "We could all play together." Like one big melody. The crowd cheered at the idea, clapping and laughing with excitement. Mr. Harris grinned and said, "Then it's settled next Friday. A new kind of show. No duels, just hearts playing together." The cafe buzzed with joy. People began ordering again, talking, smiling, but something still lingered in the air. The feeling of a miracle quietly unfolding. Mia sat back down for a moment, after everyone returned to their seats. Her hands touched the piano once more, not to play but just to feel its smooth surface. She whispered softly, "I thought I lost you, Mom, but you were here all along." She smiled, a single tear falling down her cheek. Eddie watched her from nearby, feeling a deep sense of peace. Leon looked thoughtful, lost in his own memories, perhaps remembering why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. The cafe slowly returned to its normal rhythm, yet everyone who had been there that night knew something had changed forever. They had not just witnessed a performance. They had seen a transformation, a broken heart finding its song again, a proud man rediscovering humility, and a young dreamer learning what true art meant. Mia took a deep breath and looked around. The faces of strangers now felt like friends. The piano no longer seemed like a heavy reminder of loss but a doorway to something beautiful. She whispered, "Maybe my mother was right. Music really does heal." Eddie heard her and said softly, "Yes, it healed all of us tonight." Outside the cafe, the rain began to fall lightly, tapping against the windows in rhythm with the heartbeat of the night. Inside, the warmth of music still lingered, soft and endless like an invisible song that would never fade. Mia smiled again, her fear gone, her heart full. And somewhere in the quiet corner of the cafe, it felt like her mother's spirit was smiling too, listening to the daughter who had finally found her way back to the piano. The next Friday came faster than anyone expected. The whole town seemed to be talking about what had happened at the Golden Key Cafe. People said they had witnessed something magical, a moment where music touched the sky. By evening, the cafe was already full, every chair taken, every corner filled with voices and excitement. Even the air smelled different, like hope and wonder mixed with fresh coffee and warm pastries. Mia stood behind the counter in her simple uniform, her hands slightly trembling. She could not believe how many people had come back. She kept thinking of her mother and whispered quietly, "I wish you could see this." Leon walked in wearing his usual suit, but his proud smile had softened into something gentler. Eddie followed behind, carrying his small keyboard. Waving at the crowd and smiling brightly, Mr. Harris clapped his hands and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special night, the night of harmony." The crowd cheered loudly, the lights dimmed, and the music began to breathe once again. Leon sat at the grand piano. Eddie set up his keyboard beside him, and between them was an empty stool waiting for Mia. She hesitated for a moment, feeling nervous, her heart racing like a drum inside her chest. But when she looked around and saw all the smiling faces, she gathered courage and stepped forward. The audience clapped softly as she took her seat. The piano keys gleamed under the light as if they were welcoming her back. Leon looked at her and said quietly, "You start?" His voice was kind and respectful. Mia nodded and placed her fingers gently on the keys. The first note was soft, fragile, almost like a breath. Eddie joined in with gentle chords, then Leon added deeper tones that filled the room like a heartbeat. 3 different melodies blended together like colors mixing into a perfect painting. The cafe fell silent again. Every listener frozen in awe. Mia's music was full of emotion. Her fingers moved like wind, touching every heart in the room. Eddie's rhythm wrapped around hers, warm and smooth, while Leon's strong notes held everything together like a bridge of strength. Their music spoke a language no one could explain, yet everyone understood it. People felt tears forming without knowing why. It was as if the music was healing something inside them. They didn't know was broken. Outside, rain began to fall gently against the windows, each drop joining the rhythm of the song. The sound of thunder far away echoed softly like a distant drum. But inside the cafe, everything glowed with light. Even the candles seemed to flicker in time with the melody. Mia closed her eyes and smiled as she played. She could feel her mother's presence again, not as sadness but as warmth and peace, like a gentle hand resting on her shoulder. Leon looked across the piano and saw Eddie smiling. He realized that for the first time in years he was not performing to win. He was performing to feel, and that feeling filled his heart with something stronger than pride. He looked at Mia and whispered between chords, Thank you for reminding me what music really means. Mia opened her eyes and smiled back without speaking, her hands answering him through the notes. The melody grew stronger, rising higher, faster, more powerful. The crowd gasped as the three musicians played together in perfect unity. No one leading, no one following, just one heart beating through three pairs of hands. The sound filled the room like light breaking through clouds, and then suddenly it slowed down, turning softer, sweeter, glowing like the last colors of a sunset. It felt as if time had stopped, the world holding its breath just to listen. When the final note came, it lingered in the air, long and beautiful, echoing against the walls like the whisper of a miracle. And then silence covered the cafe again, deep and full until the first clap came, then another and another, until the entire room erupted in cheers and applause. People stood from their chairs, clapping, crying, smiling, some even hugging strangers beside them. It was not just music, it was something far greater, something divine. Mia looked up and saw the whole cafe standing for her, for Eddie and even for Leon. She felt tears roll down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of joy. She turned to Leon and Eddie, saying softly, "We did it." Eddie laughed and said, "We didn't play music tonight. We made a miracle." Leon nodded with shining eyes. "Yes, we did." Together, Mr. Harris stepped onto the small stage with a bright smile, his voice shaking with emotion as he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed the heart of this cafe. Tonight music didn't just play, it healed us all." The crowd clapped again, some shouting, "Encore! Encore!" Mia laughed and said, "Maybe next time." As the crowd slowly calmed down, something quiet yet magical happened. A small child walked up to the stage holding a drawing of a piano. She handed it to Mia and said softly, "My mommy said music is like love, it never ends." Mia knelt down, hugged the child gently and said, "Your mommy is very wise," her voice trembling with emotion. Everyone watching smiled warmly when the night finally ended. The cafe was filled with a glow that no one could explain. People stayed longer just to talk about what they had felt. Some said they saw light around the piano. Others said they heard voices in the melody. Like angels humming along, Mia only smiled quietly, knowing in her heart that her mother had been there too, listening, smiling, proud as the last guest left and the lights dimmed. Mia sat at the piano one more time, playing a few soft notes just for herself. Leon stood nearby cleaning his glasses. Eddie leaned against the counter. And for a long moment none of them spoke. They didn't need to, because the music had already said everything that words never could. The sun rose softly over the small town the next morning, painting the streets in shades of gold and peace. But the real light was still glowing inside the Golden Key Cafe. People passing by stopped to peek through the windows, pointing at the piano that had become the heart of the miracle. Whispers filled the air about the waitress who played like an angel, about the duel that turned into harmony, and about the night when everyone forgot their troubles and remembered what love sounded like. Mia arrived early that morning, still wearing the same smile from the night before. She walked slowly through the quiet cafe, touching each chair and table as if they were old friends. Her hands lingered on the piano, her fingers tracing the smooth surface. She whispered softly, "Thank you." And for a moment she thought she heard the faint echo of her mother's laughter in the air. Gentle and kind, like a warm breeze through her heart, Leon entered soon after, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. His usual sharp suit now replaced with a simple sweater, his proud expression gone, replaced by peace. He placed the flowers on the piano and said with a soft laugh, "For the real star." Mia shook her head and said, "No, for the music." Eddie walked in behind him holding 3 cups of coffee, grinning as he said, "And for us, the dreamers who finally stopped competing and started creating." The 3 of them laughed together, their laughter echoing through the empty cafe like a new kind of song. By noon the place was full again. The crowd had returned not for a duel this time, but to feel the warmth that had touched them before. Some brought friends, others brought family, and a few came alone just to sit quietly and listen to the piano, even when no one was playing. They said it felt alive now, as if it carried the memory of that magical night inside its strings. Mia smiled every time she looked at it, her fear gone forever. Her heart light like morning air. Mr. Harris moved around happily, greeting everyone, telling them how proud he was of his little cafe that had become famous overnight. Reporters came asking for interviews. Photographers snapped pictures, and soon stories about the miracle at the Golden Key began spreading everywhere. But Mia never thought of it as fame. To her it was just love taking shape in sound, a gift she had shared and received all at once. Leon started teaching again. This time not in grand halls, but in small community classes where he told his students, "Play from your heart, not for applause." Eddie began writing songs inspired by that night. Songs filled with simple beauty that made people smile. And Mia kept working at the cafe, still serving coffee but also playing every Friday evening, her music filling the space like sunlight through open windows. People said her tunes made them believe in goodness again. One evening, an elderly man entered quietly and sat by the window. Mia noticed him watching her while she played. When she finished her song, he stood and clapped softly, walking up to her with a trembling smile. "My wife used to play this same song when she was alive," he said gently. "I thought I'd never hear it again, but tonight it felt like she was here." Mia's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Maybe she was." The man nodded slowly, saying, "Thank you, young lady. You gave me a piece of her back," and walked away with peace shining in his eyes outside the cafe. The world seemed calmer somehow. Strangers smiled at each other. People paused to listen when someone played music on the street, as if the miracle had spread beyond the walls, touching hearts everywhere. Leon once said, "That night changed us all," and Eddie replied, "Yes. It reminded us that miracles don't always come with light and thunder. Sometimes they come with a piano and a waitress." Mia laughed softly whenever she remembered that line. It was true. Miracles were simple when they were real. As months passed, the Golden Key Cafe became a symbol of hope, a place where anyone could come to play, to sing, or to just sit and feel alive again. People from other towns visited. Some even left small notes on the piano saying things like, "Your song helped me forgive," or "I came here broken and left healed." Mia kept every single note in a small box under the counter. She called it her music box of hearts. And every time she felt sad, she opened it and remembered that her mother's dream had finally come true. One quiet evening as the sun set, the cafe nearly empty, Mia sat alone at the piano, the golden light from the window falling across her face. She began to play softly, not for the crowd, not for applause, but for her mother, her friends, and for the memory of that first night when fear turned into courage. Leon and Eddie stood at the door watching her, neither speaking, just listening, and as she played, the music floated out into the street, wrapping around the town like a gentle hug. When the last note faded, Mia whispered with a smile, "Thank you for bringing me back." And in that moment she felt something wonderful, a quiet whisper in her heart saying, "You never left. You just needed to find your song again." She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks, but her smile stayed bright, the kind of smile that comes when pain finally turns into peace. That night, the Golden Key Cafe glowed under the stars, a soft light spilling from its windows like music made visible. People walking by stopped for a moment, listening to the silence that somehow still sounded like a song, and everyone agreed that there was magic in that place. Not the kind you see, but the kind you feel. And so the waitress who once hid her gift became the soul of a miracle that never truly ended, because her music lived on in every heart it touched, turning every note into a reminder that love never dies. It only changes its tune and keeps playing forever.